I've come to regard the words of 2 Corinthians to be some of the most stupendous in the whole of the New Testament. Let me read to you just a few very significant verses from verses 16 through 21. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though once we regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he's committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you, on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. Now, this passage describes for me, and I hope for you, the wonderful work of God's grace that offers to us the possibility of new beginning. I like to think that that's what we're saying all the time, certainly through all that we do at Wesley Mission. New beginnings, new beginnings. This is what can happen. The crux of the matter is that once a person has entered into the new life of Christ, a whole new world begins. One writer talked about us becoming brand new people. Now, think about this for a moment, what this might mean. The old has gone. Whatever the old represents, it might be sin and selfishness and wrong and bitterness and hurt. It might be a whole catalogue of different human experiences that are ours. That is gone. That is what belongs in the past. The new has come. This is the new life in Christ. All the possibility of hope and purpose and peace. That's what the new life of Christ is all about. That is why Jesus died for us. That is why his love and grace and purpose has been made real in our lives. And all of it is possible through God. See, none of this would be possible were it not for the grace of God. I loved it when Fussy talked about the priorities in her life and how her family was so important and how giving back to God in praise and song and music was so important. All of us, not just Fussy with her singing, but all of us in our daily lives have opportunity to give back to God just as he's given himself to us. We have no real reason to expect God's changing power, but we seek it. We seek it because his love is stupendous. His power is wonderful. And the hope he gives to us will maintain our purpose in life. We talk a lot in business life and in society about sustainability. And if there's going to be any sustainability in our lives, it is because the hope of Christ is sat somewhere at the heart of everything we say and everything we do. We don't have to come from a Pacific island any more than Australia to know that for us, our lives are hid with Christ in God. And receiving Christ into our lives is not the end of something. It is the start of something fresh. And this new beginning then calls us to take up God's reconciling work into our own lives. Just glance around the world and you'll see much need today. We see it spelled out in so many different circumstances. Human need that comes about through division and hate and hurt. Human need that comes about because we don't share fairly the world's resources, that we don't look after the earth as we should, and we don't care for one another. A look at even our own friends and family, we see expressions of the fractured nature of this world. And we know that there is the need for this wonderful power that God gives to us as we know what it is to share with one another. And we become aware of the need for reconciliation. Reconciliation is an act of God. We can't reconcile God to ourselves, but he can reconcile our lives somehow into his purposes to help us understand what it is that makes us the kind of people that he wants us to be. So when we talk about reconciliation, we understand it in terms of what God has done for us, but we also understand that this is what we are meant to do in the world, through our words, through our works, through our engagement in society. We're like ambassadors in other countries. And this is emphasized by the description that we find there in this passage, that we are Christ's ambassadors. Christ's ambassadors, bearing, image bearers of his love and grace. But we don't do this in our own strength, but through God's power as he speaks through us. So we read about it in verse 20. It's quite clear that this love is for all and for all time. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. So we can talk about a new birth, a new beginning. Warren Wiersbe reminded us in a book called Be What You Are, that the only way to get into the human family is by birth, and the only way to get into God's family is by birth, a new birth of opportunity and possibility through the Spirit.